Mortally dangerous medieval professions. Alchemist. Alchemy is a profession with three main goals. The first is to transform metal into gold. The second is to find a universal cure for all diseases. And the third and most important is to discover immortality. Their goals were simple, but no one really knew what they were doing. Like most natural sciences of the era, the field was shrouded in mysterious secrets, and alchemists tried to fill these gaps through their own efforts. In pursuit of this purpose, many important discoveries were made. Through distillation techniques, water could be purified. Certain plants worked remarkably well on bodily wounds. A mixture of sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate produced gunpowder. However, each discovery came at the cost of thousands of failures. Alchemy transformed over time into modern chemistry, but along the way, many people unfortunately died. The essence of alchemy was based on purification, and everything was done through fire. However, alchemists were not good at safety, not even remotely, and took no protective measures whatsoever. They only wore long robes or leather aprons. Eye and face protection did not exist in this era. Because of this, people were both dying and suffering serious bodily harm. One of the most commonly worked with substances was mercury. Because it looked like metal yet flowed like liquid, it was believed to be the elixir of life, and many people unfortunately died while working with it. Well, they were dying for nothing. Never mind, mercury is great apparently. Laboratories were extremely cramped and poorly ventilated, and the interiors were filled with flammable papers. When toxic substances like mercury and arsenic were placed into fire, poisonous fumes were produced. This caused people to sustain serious harm. Historical writings showed that these fumes wounded both the spirit and the body. Highly concentrated toxic air burned and damaged the lungs, and also caused severe headaches. Even if you escaped death in the short term, in the long term you could expect memory loss, hallucinations, or paralysis. These symptoms could manifest in the human body gradually over time. Royal Menagerie Keeper. In 1235, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II gifted 3 adult lions to King Henry III of England. King Henry adored these lions and was absolutely captivated by them. He had them beautifully housed in a menagerie at the Tower of London. Over time, elephants, polar bears, bears, and monkeys were also added to this menagerie. If only these animals had not been taken from their natural habitats and could have lived freely. Their place is not in a zoo, it should be in the wild. These exotic animals required specialized care. However, instead of trained animal experts, cheap, untrained, and expendable workers were hired. The job of these innocent and unfortunate people would be to clean, feed, and tend to the animals. No matter how cute and innocent they may appear, wild animals always signal danger and death. When keepers entered the animal cages, they were left entirely at the mercy and conscience of the animals. They were doing this job with no prior knowledge of how to meet the animals' basic needs. After all, these animals were generally hungry and savage creatures. The cages were so poorly built that they could sometimes collapse on top of people. When animals broke free from their chains, They tore the keepers apart. Being trampled under an elephant's foot or receiving a blow from a paw was a frequent occurrence with no precautions taken. Even if you managed to escape unharmed by the animals, you couldn't escape the employer. The animals belonged to royalty, so when an animal died, the keeper would face severe punishment. The lucky ones were merely dismissed. The unlucky ones were executed. Either way, death awaited. Either the animals would tear you apart, or you would be executed. Plague rat catcher. The profession of rat catching was an old one, but it was in particularly high demand during the time of the Black Death. Leading European cities like Paris and London were overrun with rats. People had not yet fully understood how the disease spread. They generally blamed demonic, poisonous air or the Jews. However, some people had noticed that filthy rats carried filthy diseases. Black rats were indeed incredibly dangerous carriers of disease. Leptospirosis caused muscle pain, fever, liver damage, and rashes. Salmonella was a separate problem altogether. Rat catchers wanted to prevent the spread of disease by hunting and killing these pests, but in doing so they were putting their own lives in danger and exposing themselves to enormous risk. Rats, not wanting to die, would bite and gnaw at everything within reach: fingers, feet, hands, arms, faces. This caused diseases to spread. Additionally, the fleas on rats transferred to humans. Once infected, the person's own fleas and lice rapidly spread the disease throughout the body. Rat catchers had to squeeze through holes and wade through cesspit trenches to find rat nests. Moving through these dark and foul-smelling places led to exposure to environmental diseases. Even a simple scratch upon contact with feces could turn into a lethal infection. Arsenic-based rat poison also caused severe damage to the lungs. Nevertheless, the efforts of medieval rat catchers helped at least somewhat slow the spread of the Black Death, and the death toll only remained in the tens of millions. Grave robber. Grave robbing was extremely common in those times. According to research conducted by the University of Cambridge, more than 20% of graves in Northern and Western Europe from the 5th and 6th centuries had been robbed. Graves were looted for two reasons: to steal valuables, bracelets, rings, gold teeth, or to steal the corpses themselves. During the Middle Ages, medicine was advancing, and physicians were conducting research on corpses to understand how the human body worked. Can't even rest in peace in a grave, at least let them be at peace there. Grave robbing was a dangerous and courageous undertaking. Digging down to 2 meters was extremely difficult and demanded enormous physical strength. Fresh soil was unstable, and some grave robbers were found buried in the very graves they were trying to rob. And just like that, they ended up digging their own graves. There was also the risk of digging up people who had died from plague, tuberculosis, leprosy, and smallpox. These diseases continued to be dangerous and contagious even after death. Opening a coffin could be lethal. Grave robbing was a serious crime in those days. Cemeteries were considered sacred places, and guards were given the authority to intervene however they saw fit if they spotted anything suspicious, such as driving a spear through your head. If caught, you would most likely be hanged. Bell ringers were timekeepers. They marked important hours of the day, called people to worship, or rang on special occasions. However, this was an extremely demanding job. An average tower bell could weigh anywhere from several hundred kilograms to several tons. The largest bells required more than one person. Playing a tug-of-war with a multi-ton piece of metal was dangerous. The momentum created by the bells swinging back and forth was enormously powerful. In 1990, thousands of London bell ringers were asked about their injuries. The answers included torn off fingernails, crushed limbs, falls from towers, and accidental hangings. These were accidents occurring in the 1990s with safety measures in place. In the Middle Ages, there were probably far more. Even if you weren't caught by the rope, the deafening sound of the bells would rattle your bones. Major city towers housed multiple bells. Each ring produced 120 decibels of sound, a level capable of rupturing eardrums. To put it in perspective, 120 decibels is like standing next to a private jet. Medieval bell ringers used no protective equipment whatsoever. They simply applied the "you'll get used to it" method. But their greatest danger was lightning. In ancient times, storms were believed to be expressions of divine wrath. Many people thought that by ringing bells when God was angry and furious, they could drive the storm away. Of course, this method didn't work. Reports from the 1700s indicate that more than 100 bell ringers were killed by lightning strikes. Lightning would strike the tower or the bell, travel down the wet rope, and kill the poor ringer below. Deaths increased so dramatically that countries like France banned bell ringing during storms nationwide until the mid-1700s, when the lightning rod was invented. Medieval scribe. The medieval scribe was not an exciting profession, but that was precisely the point. It was one of the most mundane, most tedious, and mind-numbing occupations in human history. Before Gutenberg invented the printing press, all books were written by hand. This process was physically exhausting, mentally draining, and extraordinarily slow. Books were therefore expensive and exclusive to the wealthy. Nothing for the poor, as always. However, every copy was a one-of-a-kind work of art. As a scribe, your job was to write every day except Sundays. Sundays were reserved for Jesus. Sitting in the same position all day caused serious harm to the human body. Scriptorium rooms were furnished with writing desks, ink, paper, and quill pens. The scribe would copy texts on various subjects: science, history, literature, and religious writings. This ensured that traditions and knowledge were passed down through generations. Reading hundreds of thousands of words caused extreme damage to the eyes. Constant focus at close range led to visual impairments and chronic migraines. A common misconception is that scribes were wrinkled old men writing by candlelight in the dark. This is not true. Scriptoria were designed to take advantage of natural light. There were windows on the eastern facade and morning sunlight streamed in. Writing desks were set up beside these windows. When the sun set, their work was done. Candles and paper were extremely expensive at the time. So how sensible would it really be to light a candle in a dark room full of flammable paper? The repetitive motion of writing created ergonomic problems. Constant use of quills caused extreme damage to the joints and muscles, leading to painful carpal tunnel syndrome and serious spinal deformities caused by prolonged hunching. Another health threat was the ink. Standard black ink was made from plant-based liquid and iron sulfate. It was not excessively toxic. However, the colored inks used for decoration were certainly poisonous. Red ink contained mercury. Yellows and greens used arsenic. Bright white ink contained lead. Absorption through the skin could cause rashes, headaches, and memory loss. It was extremely common for scribes to leave notes at the end of their copies expressing that they were losing their minds. An 11th century note: "He who does not know how to write cannot know how difficult it is. 3 fingers write, the whole body labors. May he who reads this book pray for me." A 12th century note: "Let this work end here. God help my hands." Another note: "This work is terrible." The mental anguish created by years of nothing but writing brought some scribes to the very edge of madness. Scribes were the least appreciated and least recognized heroes in history. Despite following an ordinary career path, they were a critical part of human history. They were the guardians of history.